we can take it forward as well from there. So speaking a little bit about Mr. Sahu, he was the former head of insights and communications at SABMiller, and his vision is to develop content that brings brand purpose to life. So a little bit about that as well is that he is the co-founder of Don'tBeContent, who was one of our first clients at ClayWorks Mini Forest as well. His company launched in 2015, and they develop expert-backed content for a wide range of businesses, ranging from fashion and lifestyle, and many other fortes like health, nutrition, beauty and wellness, food and beverage, to travel and living as well. So now I just hand it over to Akash, and he will give the presentation for all the branding tips for everyone. And if you have any questions, please feel free to drop by.
Excellent. Good afternoon and hello everyone. Thank you for taking time out. I just want to begin by thanking the team at ClayWorks, which is Rahul, Abhijit, Sanjana, and Anirudh. Thanks for hosting me. This is something we were trying to do in person, but even this works out absolutely fine. Given the times, I think this is the best way to kind of make this happen. And for those of you who've tuned in, I think I owe this to you, because it's not very easy to devote like a little over an hour on a weekday on a subject that is well important but not necessarily burning at this point in time. So thank you for taking time out, and it's my job to kind of make sure that it is exciting and also sort of has some utility to what you're doing. So would love to take questions in the end, and in the way this is structured is so I've been in the brand communications and brand marketing space for a very long time now. I have had a mixed career, moving from out and out retail operations and then into advertising, into core market research, and then a long stint with SABMiller, which is a brewing company. And that for me still remains my best school, because the extent of learning and unlearning that happened there really set the what should I say, the foundations for how I understand and sort of work on brands. Don'tBeContent, we've been there at ClayWorks right from the beginning. It's an amazing place. It's just meeting of minds. Also, it's a kind of energy that we get from that space for creativity is absolutely outstanding. So kudos for the place that you set up and the energy that we get from there. So just quickly about today, so over the years, there are a lot of brands that I have and we as DBC have had a chance to work on. I'm just going to put up a few logos here. There might be some that you recognize, possibly some that you've consumed or used them as services some point in time. It's a mix of iconic brands that have, in some cases, defined a category and gone on to create inspiration for so many others to kind of follow. And it's got an equal mix of what I call insurgent or challenger brands who are trying to disrupt in their own right. My approach has always been to bring, regardless of how much experience one has, is to bring in what we call a beginner's mindset to every project, to every challenge. And the reason I say this is there is no such thing as one size fits all. So while I might have learned or understood how to, let's say, build a communication or a content plan on Wildcraft, I can't apply the same tools or thought process to on Yoga Bar or on Fresh Menu. Each brand has its own world. Each brand has its own consumer and its own unique challenges. So what that then does is, this is kind of a mixed thing, but luckily there is no formula to just go and apply everywhere. Okay, so it's very horses for courses kind of an approach in brand building. So what I'm about to do today is essentially take a lot of what I have learned, understood, brought to life, and learned from in the course of managing all these brands and being part of their journey, and try and make it available to you in a short span of 45 minutes. So just bear with me that each slide or each section actually is a chapter in its own, and we can spend extended days just discussing just one chart. But I'm trying to give it in a very helicopter view or a very bite-sized, sort of information, so it's kind of digestible. And at any point in time, you want to delve deeper or get more insight into any of these, then happy to do so. Yeah. So there have been a lot of definitions around what makes for a great brand, and people have been writing about it for years. But I think one that kind of works for me is that I think a brand truly takes its full potential when it becomes a reason to choose or reason to purchase. Essentially, you're on a rack, you're on a shelf. There are 5 brands which are absolutely not identical, but similar in terms of offering and price are staring at you. And you have a choice to make. And that's when the brand role sort of starts playing. So I simply look at it as a brand's job is to make sure it becomes a choice driver or reason to choose. And as brand practitioners, people who are in advertising agencies, content firms, PR and digital and so on and so forth, I think all of our jobs is to just make sure that we create extremely evocative, powerful brands and give consumers enough choice and reasons to choose these brands. Yeah. So that being said, like I said, there's no formula, but I'll just run you through what does it take to set up a great brand. And these are again from mixed experiences. And so please bear with me that it is going to be a little brief, but as much as possible, I think I should be able to land it in like decent depth. So let's see how that goes. Yeah. Just to kind of time check, we see this as a 45-minute sort of a module, and then we can look at questions. Okay, the first one is visualize your consumer. The reason I say this is many times you get into boardrooms or brand teams where they've already gone in stage 3, stage 4 of brand development. And when you just ask them to pause and say, okay, hang on, this looks great, but who are you building this for? And in many instances when we hear that, we will figure that out, or, once we create it, there'll be a market for it, which is not a bad approach. But what then happens is, you miss out on a lot of consumer nuances that would have otherwise informed your brand creation, your product creation. So the consumer closeness is something that I'm a big fan of, and I've been doing it for a very long time. So visualizing your consumer is absolutely important. And I think it doesn't go to say that you cannot create like Apple, for example, creates absolutely outstanding products, but they don't go keep researching or asking your consumer, hey, so what do you think you need? Because many times the consumer is not really ready to articulate what he or she needs. However, you don't go to consumer for generating ideas, but here it's more for the things like validation and so on. But consumer closeness is absolutely important. Absolutely important. So I'll just give you a small contrast. And being in market research, we're always receiving data in multiple forms, sometimes as large tables with a lot of cohorts and graphs and so on and so forth, which doesn't have enough flesh on the bone. So this is an example, which is 36-year-old woman, working professional, has kids, likes watching TV, has a DTH connection, enjoys eating ice cream at night with family. Great data. I mean, tells me something about the person, but I would say not rich enough that I can, get into the skin of this person and understand this person very well. But I contrast this with something else, which is something on these lines, which is I hide ice cream from my kids so that me and my husband can eat it once they've gone to bed, watching Netflix, eating out of a tub, and using just one spoon. The richness and the nuance that you get with this sort of consumer closeness and how that helps you craft or build your brand is very, very different. I'm not for once saying use one over the other, but make sure you have both on your table when you're sort of building your consumer portrait or your consumer understanding. This is the other thing. I keep saying this to a lot of founders that resources are always going to be constrained, but there's never going to be a dearth of ideas. So ideas are actually unlimited, but resources are going to be limited. And we are faced with this many times because you have to make some really hard choices on where to put the money. And a lot of that actually is also linked to which consumer should I go after. So I'll give an example from, and this is purely illustrative. So it's not that I know these people here, but it is purely illustrative. So look at 3 consumers here, 3 different, let's say, use cases. So Dhruv is a more affluent guy. He's a banker, lives in Indiranagar in Bangalore. The brands that define him are Apple, Uber, Netflix, and Spotify. He unlocks his phone using a Face ID. He has a wallpaper on his phone that is to do something with his passion, like deep sea diving and things like that. Anish on the other side is an event management professional, lives in RT Nagar. His phone is a OnePlus, loves Amazon, moves around in Ola, watches his movie or books them on Book My Show. He uses a fingerprint lock and is a huge Arsenal fan, and that's his wallpaper. Then we're talking about Vijay, who actually owns a hardware store, which is in Alsur, has a Micromax phone, is frequent on Paytm, loves YouTube, has a pattern lock, and his wallpaper is actually his family picture from a recent temple visit. Now, 3 different profiles, and the shows that they've watched recently and they're excited about is Game of Thrones, Made in Heaven, and Big Boss, which is in Kannada. Now, when you're pitching a certain service to these guys and you ask them what will actually make them, let's say, find the service appealing or make them sort of, opt in, is in case of Dhruv, he's saying, I would love to, let's say, opt in for the service, which is a delivery service, if it saves my time. For me, time is premium. You have Anish here in the center who's saying, I'm willing to do it because I'm willing to pay for it if it saves me the effort, because I have an extremely busy lifestyle. I'm an event management person. I live like 26 hours a day, so I need somebody to kind of fill in for me. So I'm willing to pay for that. In case of Vijay, not very affluent, so he's more a mainstream consumer. And what kind of works for him is the fact that I will pay for it as long as it saves me money, which essentially means the money that would take me to go from point A to point B, if I were to substitute that with somebody else doing it for me and it's cheaper, I would opt in for sure. But when you look at them, the benefits they're seeking or what drives them is extremely different. Now, you can't, let's say, cast or set up your business to appeal to one or not appeal to the other and so on, because you have a wider set there at play. So differences will always be staring at you at all times. And just as humans, we are so wired to see differences among people that we don't spend enough time, let's say, trying to understand what unifies them. Because the moment you find what unifies, it helps you set up your brand slightly differently, because then you have a kind of an approach that you can tick more boxes with just one offering. But what you realize at the end of the day is all of them are willing to pay for convenience. All of them are hugely convenience seeking, but what they're willing to trade off is very, very different. So just to summarize the previous point, which is about strive to find what unifies people. You can't have a single brand fulfilling 15 needs and you kind of chip chop your brand just to sort of play up to that. So just strive to find what unifies people. I've been in the consumer insights role for a very long time, and it's a way of life for me. Always on, looking at things in a way that might kind of skip other people's sort of sight. Reason I bring this up is there are insights and great insights staring at you at all times, in the people you meet, in the stores you walk into, in airport aisles, at all times. And some of these actually can just leapfrog the brand into a whole different level. Idea is to be extremely attentive and always on. I'll just give an example of how you unlock growth using an insight. This is a very popular brand from the Unilever stable called Axe, which is a deodorant for men. What you see at the bottom is actually a fact, which most of us will agree with, that women like men who smell good. I mean, let's not sort of debate that. But let's assume that that's a fact. Now, working towards building a brand just basis of fact can happen, but you can get to something more powerful and more unifying and universal if you get to something which is a much deeper truth. And when you start thinking more upstream, you get to a point about saying, this is important because smelling good improves your chances with women. Okay, so that's how you kind of think slightly more upstream, and going even higher, which is to a point of getting like a core insight, is about, honestly, deep inside, every man dreams of women making the first move. You could set up a whole brand, a brand promise, and a universally appealing brand, which doesn't need to have an advertising or campaign that is different in the way it plays in Australia versus in Czech Republic or in Cape Town. You can have a unifying insight because it's deep and it's human. The only thing you need to watch out for is to keep it culturally and geographically sensitive by looking at what kind of models you cast or the language and those kind of things. But the intention is to get to a unifying insight that is really powerful and unlocks growth of the brand. I've been a big fan of this, which is human being, don't be content, are just striving towards, we get a lot of stuff thrown at us, but I think it takes a lot of work to just cut through the noise and clarify and then simplify the message, simplify the understanding, and then go about amplifying it. SABMiller for me has been a great school. I'll never stop saying that, simply because they are just simple ways of cracking a problem. And this was a metaphor that was widely used in the SABMiller business, which is a radio station tuning is a great metaphor for positioning. What I mean by that is, if you're a station that plays at 98.4, you play best at 98.4. If you move slightly to the left at 98.6, you hear a hush, you hear a bit of static. And same if you go more towards the right. you're best heard, you're most clear at 98.3 because that's your station. That's just kind of getting to the point of the sharpness of how your positioning needs to be set up. The reason I bring this up is in a competitive, extremely competitive setup, you have another channel at 98.5, 98.6, 98.7, and there's so much of parity in what is being said that your need for a sharp positioning becomes that much more important. So strive, just moving it from understand your consumer, build it there into an insight, from insight, take it into how you position and set up your brand nicely. The second piece is what we call content or messaging, or what I call your comms, or your communication strategy. What this does is works with a set of equalizers and different, let's say, modules, which kind of sets you up saying what should be my messaging, how should I land it, my tone of voice, and so on and so forth. You set up your content strategy. The last one, of course, is AMPLIFY, which is how you make your media choices, which is starting from online, experiential, offline, in-person, B2B, B2C, regardless of what business you're in. The idea is to see how you will set up your amplification. So taking from insights into positioning to content strategy and then media choices. So this is really important because I keep going back to clarify, simplify, amplify, and spend time on this when you're setting up your brand, simply because it ends up many times becoming a case of what we call ready, fire, aim, which is you put it out in the market and without enough thought, and then you keep coming back and you don't feel comfortable with what you put out, and you keep kind of revising the brand, which is not kind of ideal. So spend time on laying your brand foundations correctly. It'll kind of hold the brand strong for the future. Moving on, this is a little sort of woolly thing, but I will still take you through it, which is humanize your brand. This actually is something I stumbled upon a little later in my career, a good 8-9 years back, which is how brand archetypes is used as an approach or a framework to demystifying some of the brands and also helping brands humanize them. So I'll give an example here. So for instance, where brand archetype actually emerges from is it was used a lot in behavioral sciences way back, and which is what you see here, Margaret, Mark, and Pearson. So this is an essential reading on the subject called Hero and the Outlaw. What they actually set out to do is that across time and across space, humans have understood other humans around them by way of giving them simple roles, or what I call pattern recognition. And for example, if you looked at a really old, like a grandmother in deep Australia who is, let's say, telling a story to her grandchild, she will set up the story in a particular way that there was a magician, there's a bad guy, and there was a kid who was extremely innocent and was taken for a ride, and somebody, a hero, steps in and saves the kid, and so on. So there's a storyline to it, and how characters sort of unfold. This way of storytelling is actually no different from the tribes in Kenya or somewhere in the North Pole and so on, because this is how we made sense of the world. So what Hero and the Outlaw and what Mark and Pearson talk about is, if all of us have a deep pattern recognition for how we understand and make sense of the world around us, if brands were to sort of tap into that knowledge or that deep understanding, then it becomes that much more easier for brands to be understood by their consumers. And that's how this book and this sort of thought process moved from pure science into brand science. And this is like a 2 days worth of talking and workshop, but I'll just sort of kind of skim this through. So it essentially talks about there are two continuums or what we call need states, which are kind of acting at all times on us. There's a need to belong and a need to be independent. That's one axis. The other axis is need to control and need for freedom. So that gives you like a cross like this, which is how the axis is set up, the X and Y. Now, depending on what is your prime need, each of those quadrants actually have a sense of expression, which are further kind of wedged out into 12 dominant archetypes. So when you start at the 1 o'clock position, you have seeking safety, about innocence. Seeking understanding, which is a need, is an archetype called sage. Seeking freedom is an explorer. Seeking liberation is an outlaw. Seeking power or a power to transform is magician. Seeking mastery over something which is complex is and seeking intimacy is lover, and so on and so forth. There's enjoyment, belonging, service, control, innovation. You might recognize some of these brands here, and I'll just run you through some of them. So for instance, if you take from top, you have, I don't know how many of you have consumed this brand called, I mean, we might know about brands like Paperboat and Dove and so on and so forth. So some of these brands are in the space of innocent. When you watch a Paperboat commercial or packaging, all of that is meant to evoke a sense of nostalgia, which is an expression of innocence. So Neeraj, who's the founder at Paperboat, is a big fan of Hero in the Outline, the whole philosophy of brand archetype. So it was kind of embedded into how the brand was going to be created. So starting from liquid profiles on Paperboat to packaging to communication, bringing in the whole Malmo track in the back aligns beautifully to the sense of innocence that the brand is meant to evoke. With Wildcraft, which is inherently an outdoors brand, so Explorer is, let's say, a very inherent, sort of archetype for Wildcraft, but that's really how Wildcraft is set up. Then there's Spotify and Dyson when you talk about Magician. Snickers is a great example for Hero, which is at your 5 p.m. position. So Snickers' fight is always with hunger. And Snickers has this very simple proposition that Snickers takes you to the next meal, and Snickers fighting with hunger. So that's a Hero brand. And then comes on your left at 7 o'clock, you have Netflix, Instagram, Godiva, which are just meant to evoke a sense of seduction, and that's the lover archetype. And I talked about this at length, which is just your experience on Netflix is nowhere close to how it feels on Amazon Prime. Netflix has something about it. I mean, there's something more seductive about getting onto Netflix. Examples closer home for Jester, a brand like Sprite, and for those of you who are following Bingo and Bingo's advertising, which is a chip brand from ITC, that's a Jester. The Jester's job is to just make everyone happy. And then there's Geico in the US and Cheetos, which is a big brand. Dunzo, in today's times, the brand making a lot of chatter. So Dunzo is an everyman brand. So is Indigo Airline and Chai Point and so on. So the point I'm trying to make is the early on in your brand journey, you're ready to align your brand to one of these archetypes, the better it is, because it gives you sharpness, gives you guardrails on where to take the brand. And many a times when brands are repositioning, I've also been part of some instances where brand is like, I think we've grown out of the whole everyman positioning. We've got more edge. I think we're more heroic. So can we kind of reset our brand? And resetting cannot be an extremely impulsive or an overnight process. So there's what we call morphing. You have to morph into a new position, which takes time. You have to build steps in between. So this is a great sort of a framework. And long story short, I think invest in the archetype thinking a little early on in your brand journey, and you'll not regret it. Yeah. The next one is really around different beats better. Big believer in this simply because I think a lot of brands are just trying to outdo the next brand. And what I mean by that is trying to beat them on price, trying to beat them on offering, on packaging, on availability, and so on. If the same energy was spent in creating something that's different, I think it just gives you an edge which is at a whole new level. So if you have a choice in creating something that makes you nervous, could actually get you fired if you're in a company to even propose that idea, just go ahead and do it. Because that's really what you need to do. A fresh example, I just love this brand. Stumbled upon this at a Target store in some time back. So Veli is actually just redefining first aid kits and have got severe traction and love coming through. Band-Aids from Johnson & Johnson have been there for like donkey's years. I think barring from changing the quality of their adhesive or adding some graphics from Toy Story on top of their bands to make it interesting for children, they really haven't done any fundamental change to what they were offering. Then comes Veli, which has completely redefined what first aid care is all about. And I picked up some of these tins, brilliant products, and they call it, even the whole language around it should be on their website, extremely immersive. You spend half a day just kind of tripping on the website. So it talks about, they call them bravery badges because they believe if kids fall, they need to show it off. Because apparently among teens, chicks actually dig guys with scars. So bravery badges is like, you want to wear it on. For badges that actually are not visible to people, they have this whole thing called undercover agents. There's in fact a whole new line for different parts of the body. For instance, if you fall on and get a bruise on your elbow or on your knee, which is a slightly different structure because it's not flat surface unlike your wrist. So you need a different plaster because it's a curve. and it kind of keeps flexing. So they have different products for knees and elbows, and they actually call it bumper stickers. So it's an extremely interesting, innovative, evocative brand, and it sells at a premium, almost 1.8 times of Band-Aid, and it has a crazy fan following. Brand close from home. I've been following ID Foods for a while now, and I think they've been disrupting fairly periodically. They have a fantastic innovation practice and a thought process, starting from Mustafa on the top. You'll see that coming through. It's a simple thing, right? Which is all of us, especially in the south of India, grew up eating vadas, and if we have an urge, we go to a nearest restaurant, but no one bothers to make it at home. Primarily because it's a pain just to kind of get it right, and it ends up looking ugly and not appetizing at all. And then comes not just the batter, but a simple squeezy, which brings just the whole control in your hands in how you sort of set up and make the vada at home. So simple disruptions. Now bear in mind, the second guy who comes up with this, one is going to take a lot of time. He may not get it right. Even if he gets it right, that's great for him. But ID will always go down as the people who cracked creating vada at home. So again, going back between being different and being better, put energies in being different. Always, please. I'm not sure if you heard of Seedlip. So Seedlip is, I'd say 4-5 years old right now. Let me tell you something. So I've been in the food and beverage zone for some time now. And also for a lot of us, food is all about memories. But when you consume this, it's unlike anything you ever tasted. And so Seedlip sells for close to 30 pounds in the UK and is now also in the US and some parts of Asia. But Seedlip essentially is a non-alcoholic spirit which is distilled, which fundamentally means they're peddling flavored water at you at 40 pounds, 30 pounds. But it has become a sensation for the bartender community, for mixologists, and for people who just love, playing with their drinks. And Seedlip recently got bought over by Diageo. I can't exactly remember for what value, but it just got bought over by Diageo. And Diageo found it that, that there is this whole emergence of what we call a drinking culture, which is called sober is the new high. So a lot of people are actually gravitating towards easy drinking, less alcohol sort of products, and Seedlip has a lot of legs going forward. So Diageo bought this brand maybe about a year back. Look out for it on your travels whenever that happens, but it'll be hard to justify it to yourself because this is going to compete with a Glenfiddich next to you or a Jim Beam in the duty free, but it's definitely worth it. Moving on to build memory structures, and I can't tell you enough how this is important. This essentially means that humans have terrible attention spans. Create memory structure as assets around your brand that can make comprehending, understanding, remembering the brand very easy. Humans are extremely lazy. We love to default. We're super lazy. And in those fleeting seconds, if we can land your brand, then nothing like it. So some great brands do it. Coke is a fine example in the way they kind of bring in the entire color play there. Brand close from home. I love the Amul example simply because it is an everyday brand. And what it does for most of us Indians is it's become like a small mascot, which gives its kind of interesting take on what's happening, like a flavor of the week or what is topical. But what's charming about Amul is it has a simple structure, what I call a stencil. And the stencil has a headline, which is attention grabbing. The headline links up to something which has just happened that week. And whatever is topical is then linked to point. And all of that rallies back into a tagline under the brand name, which is to sort of help people comprehend. Now, people in a traffic signal or any time don't spend their time rearranging or understanding this template. Everyone gets this template. What it helps the brand is to stay what I call fresh consistent. So freshly consistent is your stencil is consistent, but the message you're landing is extremely fresh. So very digestible, easy to get, and every time somebody gets it, it brings a smile to your face and kind of helps you find that interesting connection between what you read in the papers 2 days back versus what just happened. So this is a great example of what I call reinforcing memory structures. Cadbury's, another iconic brand in India, as well as most of Europe. This is a great example of what happens when you take away all graphics from the pack and just keep the hero graphic. And this was something they did as for a non-profit called Age UK, which is, they said, use your words, donate your words, go and speak to people about it and those kind of things. And they released a whole line of chocolates without any branding on top of it. But the real charm in this is that it is still unmistakably Cadbury Dairy Milk Bar because of the color and the Pantone and all of that. So memory structures, again, very important. And I did this small trick with my kids. I asked them to find the 6th airline in this page, and they immediately said Indigo, without me having to mention Indigo. And the reason that happened is because Indigo has invested in a color palette and a type or a font over the years, which has made it unmistakably Indigo. So even if I put this up, while it's a crazy conflict, while one part of your mind is saying, but I don't see it here, but the system one, the deep mind is actually telling you, hey, hang on, I see Indigo in this. So memory structures, very important, invest in it and stay at it. This is, I think the charm of being in Bangalore is that you're constantly talking to a lot of business founders and people in the startup space are on steroids, want to do stuff really fast. So this was not a value that I was a big fan of, let's say 5-10 years back. It's also how the, let's say the Indian wiring is that keep striving till you get it right. You know, riyaz karo, matlab parishram karo, and keep getting at it until you kind of perfect it. But the point is, I mean, perfection is great, but I think what you lose out on is that you can take stuff out into the marketplace, even if it is semi-done, and keep improvising it live. And I think I've just learned that firsthand from a lot of brands that I had a chance to work on. And now it's pretty much how I look at a lot of things. It wasn't the case, like I said, 8-10 years back. And this is like a simple graphic, but it possibly kind of explains. So both are the same, but the approach is slightly different. The one on the left talks about you cannot go up on the tier till you kind of knock off the ones at the bottom. This is one approach, and nothing wrong with it, but it might take a lot more time, might kind of sap you in terms of resources and drain you out. And most importantly, it doesn't give you a chance to periodically validate by consumers. Versus the one on the right, and this is the classic MVP way of doing things, right? Which is keep improvising on the run. The one on the right, of course, is that develop, which is, you know, something that's good to go to market, take it out and start improvising. Because one thing I've learned, regardless of how much spit and polish you put on your brand and keep it like absolute shiny, the day you take it to the market will respond and you will have people saying this is trash. So why not hear that from the consumers like 2 years earlier on is the question. So the idea to get it out is actually very important. So for those of us who are, let's say, nuts about perfection, I'm just urging you to just put it out there because you'll learn faster from the market than sitting in your studios or in your offices. An example here, this is what Google's page looked like in 2011. I mean, this looks like the 60s, but it is not too long back. This was like 10 years back. But just to say that this felt right at that point in time for Google, and Google has moved just so far right now. This page is very dear to us simply because this was another perfect case of done is better than perfect. This was our website landing page the day we took off and started Don'tBeContent. We just looked at different phrases which have DBC built into them, took it on a page, highlighted Don'tBeContent with a different color, hoping that somebody would just hover the mouse and click on it and that takes to the contact page and be done. So that was pretty much a website. Now, we're emotional about this page simply because it kind of helped us generate leads in the early days, and this was our humble sort of website. I always believe that great brands archive from day one, and I urge you to also do that because when you look back, it just tells you how much you've moved, how much you've covered. So don't wait for that perfect moment. Archive your brand from day one. Take snapshots, take what your offices look like, what your initial Facebook pages look like, what did your business cards look like. So preserve all of that because it makes for a great story as time goes by. So this slide actually features on most of our presentation in the last, and we like it. So, the next one is about be authentic, and never more true than now, because a lot of brands and whatever they kind of espoused as their values and purposes are kind of put to a lot of text. Being authentic is about kind of living and staying true to your promise. A brand that kind of comes to my mind is Patagonia. Been a big fan of this brand, and it's a case study on its own. You can spend days reading about how they get things right. But again, to be brave enough to shut your shop on Black Friday, which pretty much is the day America goes nuts buying stuff, and putting out a message in outlets saying don't buy this jacket, and encouraging people to buy, which is sort of continue to wear the existing jacket, or they have a whole line in their store called the worn wear. Worn wear is where they refurbish old jackets that are either returned by people and make them like new, and they encourage people to come back and give it back and have a huge community program. Not just that, I think what they also triggered is a whole movement, which is, so brands like North Face and Rye, which are pretty much in the same space of outdoors, in the subsequent Black Friday, sort of festivals and the next year actually, also shut their stores on Black Friday. And I think it was North Face who had this campaign which said, we are shut because we've asked our employees to go outdoors. And they shut all their shops in all of America on Black Friday. So you stand for something, just walk the talk, be authentic, and don't just go telling around, yeah, I am this and I am that. You actually got to make sure it happens, and you make it happen on a day-to-day basis. This is an important one, and this is for a lot of, let's say, young brand managers or brand practitioners who are getting into brand marketing in a very serious way. So here's the problem. The way the media is set up and how consumption is set up right now is that you're going to be forced to constantly take action, which is, did you put up the post? Did you put up that LinkedIn thing? Why don't you change the logo? Why don't you move the logo from the left to the right? Because this is not, and so on and so forth. Now, while to yourself, that looks like, yeah, I'm doing a lot, but you'll be surprised actually doing more bad than good, because activity is not always action. So don't mistake movement for action. They're very two different things. So the way I look at brand creation and brand sustenance is that good brand managers build their brands or do their work so that the fruits are actually, enjoyed by the next brand manager, not themselves. So you build it for the future. You don't get impulsive. You don't keep changing because you want to leave your mark on the brand and take the brand hostage. It's a living organism. It's got to be kept in a certain way. And this leads me to a simple example called the goalkeeper's paradox. The reason I bring this up is it's been mathematically proven that if a goalkeeper actually stands during penalties exactly in the center, he has greater odds of saving the goal than jumping to the right or left. But what happens is there is this whole concept of what I call people are okay to fail conventionally and succeed unconventionally. So this goalkeeper might feel like a fool that I didn't jump and I just stood in the center, and what would my coach think? What would my fans think? What would my family think? So let me look like I actually tried, and they jump left or they jump right. But you're better off with just standing where you are. Same thing goes with stocks and investments and so on. Market goes up, market goes down. Everyone gets impulsive, gets trigger happy and starts doing things. But most things in life have to compound. They have to take time. So my urge is don't just keep what I call dicking around with the brand. Just let it be. Not that I'm not a big fan of brands that need refurbishing or revitalizing. I'm sure we should do it to keep it in tune with times. But this day-to-day, week-on-week, playing around with it is absolutely blasphemy. The next one's about be patient. And this again ties into the fact that great brand building takes time. Reason I bring this up is this was a very old framework. It's been with me for a fairly long amount of time. It's a simple plot. It says that just like any other relationship, you have access for habit and you have access for love, which means if you meet your milkman every day, you have high habit. You're seeing him every day, but you don't love the milkman. Yeah? So that's habit versus love. So this reason I bring the milkman example is we will just kind of play out to you in a second. So what it says is that different brands at different points in time are having a relationship with its consumers. So our consumers, either are consumers in love with your brand or they're in a habit with your brand. So a simple example is that, let's say, let me actually populate this, you get an idea. So take a brand which is low on love. I have no affinity to this brand and I don't use it that much. So my relationship with the brand is just acquaintance. I'm just acquainted to this brand. I see it. I don't care much, but it's kind of around me. when the relationship builds, either by way of increased habit or usage or increased love, then the entire section kind of starts to change. Think about how you see your neighbors. You see your neighbors every day, but you don't necessarily love them, unless they come and ask for some small help or, so on and so forth, or ask you to kind of put the volume down. But essentially neighbors are high on frequency of usage or visibility, but low on love. So that's neighbors. And this is how the entire quadrant kind of builds. You have extended family on the top, which is high behavior loyalty and low emotion. You have a concept called hostage, where there's high indifference and you feel like you've been taken a hostage, but you continue to be there. And just layering it further, you got colleagues, you have good friends, distant lovers. Distant lovers is a great example, which is you love the brand. And this is great for brands which are highly aspirational. And a lot of people who say, one day I will own a Rolex, one day I will buy a Louis Vuitton, and so on. So all of those brands are about being high on love, high on affinity, but low on practice, low on behavior. So it's almost like distant lovers. Then come courtships, where there's some amount of relationship and frequency. The last one, of course, is called happy marriages. Happy marriages happen when there's high habit and high love kind of relationship with the brand. Now, you can use this framework in tons of ways, and I use this all the time. So if I go out, actually you can do this even internally. So let's say you're a brand which is, let's say, a hospitality brand. You got 100 people who have walked into your spaces, over the last whatever years. When you start plotting each of the relationships with your brand, you realize that everybody who's interacted with my brand has primarily done it by being either an acquaintance or a neighbor. And then you know how much of a task is cut out for you to move them to happy marriages. How much of time it would take, how much of investment it would take, how would it change your messaging to get people from who are just fringe and have no emotion with your brand, but now you need to invest on emotion with them. The reason I also bring this up is because a lot of times we hear brand practitioners saying, oh, people just love a brand. It's okay if they're not buying it, but they just love a brand, which is great. But it's also great if you can translate all that love into real purchase. Or on the contrary, you have people who say that, oh, people buy us every day. And, so that's good enough. And which is fine in some cases. Like having this habit is fine. You don't need love all the time. The habit is great. But just knowing that is very important, because you just know what's actually cut off. The other thing I've done so that this kind of sinks in slightly better is I looked at services that I consume as a consumer. I try to plot it on this so you get an idea of how I'm looking at this, which is slightly different. So here are the brands, all service brands that I've been consuming as an individual, and where I see my relationship with these brands. Let me start from the bottom. I'm not a big fan of Slack. Neither do I use it often, but it's on my phone. And so Slack sits there for me. That's an acquaintance. It disappears tomorrow. It doesn't really matter to me, but Slack is there. ICICI Bank, I've been banking with them for the last 18, 20 years, but of all the work they've done, of all the money that we have kind of exchanged, they haven't gone past neighbors. You can imagine, and this is an exaggerated, let's say, notion. Let's say 50 million consumers of ICICI Bank think of this bank like this. Then I think they have a huge task ahead of them. Then comes Vodafone, which is even crazy because I've been in Vodafone like 20 years plus now. I honestly, a hand on heart, I jumped onto them because of their advertising and the whole treatment of the brand and all of that, but terrible at service. I feel like a hostage, but I'm just hanging on because the alternatives are not great. So I have very low emotional loyalty, but I have a very high behavior loyalty. I hope you kind of get the framework. Moving to extreme right is Netflix, which I call absolute marriage or happy marriage, because I just like how the brand is set up, what they do, how they present themselves, how they serve content, how they do their advertising, and also just in terms of how frequently I watch it, particularly now, but even otherwise. I can't get my head around liking Amazon Prime. There's something about it that just doesn't hit the spot. And Netflix to me is happy marriage. Yeah. So here's what you can do. Take your 20 top customers or 30 top customers, plot them on this, see where they kind of stack up. Create a bit of graph and see, okay, fine, so these are my challenges, how can I move them around, and what does brand have to play in terms of a role, or should I change my service offerings, and so on and so forth. We're kind of getting into the last 10 minutes, just as a time check. So the next one's called Change Needs Words. I'll spend some time here because we're in the business of content creation, all of us, one way or the other. The challenge also is that 10 years back or 20 years back, only brands were creating content, consumers were consuming content. Today, consumers creating content, and sometimes even better than brands. So the challenge to us is, how do we raise the bar? And to that, I would all say is that regardless of who you are, what sector, what role you play, my request to you is start writing. It could be a tweet, a blog, notes to yourself, things to do list, doesn't matter. Just start writing, because nothing clarifies thought and commits like writing. So try and make that a habit. And of course, linked to writing is also reading. So consume a lot of content in text, highlight stuff, put your post-its. I mean, just get nuts about words, because revolution needs words. When you want to change behavior, to change people to do stuff, it requires great words and be able to land it nicely. Particularly in leadership positions, when you're expecting people to change, words actually mean a lot, and it can be extremely powerful. This is fairly old, but I thought it's perfect for today's time and what we are going through. This is from Swiss Life, which is just talking about, for all of life's twists and turns, flexible financial plans. So that's the premise. And the way the words are set up is absolutely beautiful. So it starts off with one thing, ends up with something else, because of how things change so suddenly. Okay. So, and I'll try reading this out, which is, you're the only woman I love. I love a man now. So it kind of plays in. I like working with you is impossible. We got everything, we need a loan. So there's this whole, we got everything we need a loan. So there's this whole, play of words or power of words that's kind of playing out here. David Abbott wrote this for Economist years ago, which is, I never read The Economist, management trainee, age 42. I've seen this poster in A2, A1 size, framed in so many offices, because this is extremely, extremely powerful writing for The Economist by David Abbott. Kenneth Cole, I see this as a very underrated brand. They have a creative practice inside their company. They don't have an agency. They do a lot of writing all by themselves. This is around the election time. And they have this really spectacular book called Footnotes by Kenneth Cole. If you can pick it up, that'd be great. It's got just the making of Kenneth Cole and how they approach writing as a practice in the business. Which itself is a beginning, but historically Nike has written some of the most powerful lines, absolutely goosebumpy lines. And apart from what's here, I think one that stands out for me is, something on the lines of pain is laziness leaving the body. Because words can move people, please invest in words. Yeah, so that's really where we are. So I honestly can't wait to go outdoors and start getting my hands dirty, but so keep your hands washed, stay indoors, stay curious, don't be content. And you have any questions, please shoot your questions on ask@Don'tBeContent.com. If you have ready questions, please ask right now. But if you have something you want to kind of sit on, mull over, and write to me, please use this email address. Just one more thing. True to the spirit of Don't Be Content, I packed a few bonus. This, I think, is Bill Bernbach from DDB ages ago. And he talked about how when everything becomes a constant, company for company, brand for brand, money for money, resource for resource, creativity will be your last legal unfair advantage. So use it to your fullest. Creativity is not a department. It's starting from your office boy to front desk to head of HR to pretty much everyone is creative. The idea is to tap to it and use it to your advantage. Quick examples here, and this is absolutely out there. So VanMoof is a cycling brand which is delivered. I mean, you order online, it's a flat pack, the box comes over to your home, and this is out of the US. So these guys were experiencing huge amount of breakages on delivery when it's delivered to consumers, and returns were getting little out of hands. A study they realized is that a lot of shippers and people who were handling it were actually throwing the packs around, just knowing that it had cycles inside them, which are essentially quite strong and sturdy. So I can afford to throw the cycle in a box around like this, which was actually leading to damages. And to kind of find a way to cut that, all they did was they did a brainstorm. The founders sat down, cracked an idea, which is, let's just have a television screen on our box. What the television screen does is it changes how it triggers a sense of fragile is in the box for the handler. And the handler started handling the boxes a lot more delicately. Now imagine if this was not how they approached it, and they approached it non-creatively. It could have taken them reaching out to a new supplier, new shipper, maybe creating hard boxes or wooden boxes. I don't know what, but I just think they tapped into something a lot deeper and found creative way of solving a problem. I was in Oakland about 2 months back for a cider conference, and it was a conference which was heavily attended. I think we had upwards of 2,000 odd people that came from all over the US and a few other countries, exhibiting and showcasing their ciders. I would have exchanged cards with so many people I can't tell you. But when I came back, the card that stood out for me was this card by a guy called Chris from Cold Break. And simply because of what he did with his card. I call this a creative way of playing with your own media. This is your own media. You're not buying, this is not Times of India. This is your own media. So your cards, your email signatures, your uniforms, your backdrop in your office is own media. Use it to your advantage. I still preserve this card. I may or may not reach out to him, but I will keep it as kind of gold standard for how you set up a card. So that's his picture on what he looked like as a kid. And those are his coordinates. And this is back of card, which just has an Instagram feed. It just makes for an interesting card. It takes little effort, but makes it very memorable. This is another beautiful example. So close to 150,000 people took to streets in the UK, I think in November of last year. This was the climate change and use less paper conversation that happened. Counterintuitive, but while all were carrying large placards and kind of moving around, her name is Katie Burrell, if I'm not wrong. So she put out this really lollipop size placard which says use less paper. And I also call this whispering in the times of loud. When everyone around you is being super loud, you can afford to be whispering because actually you'll be heard out. And while she does this, she actually gets to be on the cover of so many magazines. She literally became a mascot for that entire movement that happened in the UK. By doing something, and that's why I say it is the unfair legal sort of advantage, which is get creative with your work, with everything that you put out there. Dracula, so here's the thing about why creative can give you an edge. So imagine if BBC went to their advertising firm and said, listen, we're going to be launching a new show. I'd like you to take 40 to 50 billboards all over London to tell people that we're launching this new series called Dracula, and tune in, it's going to be on some channel and somewhere else. But what the agency did was they took one site, exactly one site in South London. The way they went about it is what is really extraordinary. So they created, in the daytime, this billboard actually looked like just stab wounds and knives and so on and so forth on your left, and it just had show details on the right. As night sets in, they had a lighting setup which kind of illuminated or cast a shadow, which made it look like Dracula, which is what you see on this hoarding. The amount of free PR and amplification that this single hoarding got, I don't think they would have managed it with having even 30, 40 sites. I mean, leave alone the cost of production and those kind of things, the PR costs of making it available to everyone there. So creativity gives you an edge, is your advantage, use it to your fullest. And I think that's pretty much from me. Quick summary is visualize your consumer, find what unites them, unlock growth with insight, clarify, simplify, amplify, humanize your brand. That's the whole archetype piece. Differentiation beats being better. Build memory structures so people get your brand with least amount of effort. Done is better than perfect. Be authentic to your cause, to what you set out to do. Activity not always is action. So try to find the difference and so don't be, like I keep saying, don't dick around with the brand. Let it sit. Be patient and real change needs powerful words. Yeah, so that's us.
Hey Akash, so that was really very informative. Thank you for your time. Over this last 45 minutes of your presentation, I got quite a few interesting questions as well from the audience. So I'll just give it to you in the order I've got it, and then we can even address all of them at the same time.
Yeah, sure.
So the first question we had was, what are the key data points which help differentiate consumers to suit your target audience better?
What are the key data points?
Yes, so this question had come when you were talking about.
Sure. Okay, so I don't want to get into the depths of market research, but when you start meeting different kinds of consumers, there is a process called identifying unifiers and discriminators. So what I mean by that is there are a lot of parameters on which you'll realize that they don't seem to be differentiated at all. But there are on some where they are highly discriminatory. So I'll give an example. So this was a piece of work we did for a spices brand. And this was a brand that was creating spices for continental cooking. Now, when we start meeting consumers who are actually dabbling with continental cooking at home, we realize that there is a simple continuum which has people on the left who've just got into making it versus people who actually mastered it. There's a continuum of people who are dabbling, cannot beat her at all those things, but similarly, the mother cannot beat her on things like making a lasagna or a pasta and those kind of things. So what excites her about bringing in a lot of these condiments and spices into her kitchen is because she gets to nudge her mother-in-law out of the kitchen on certain dishes. So it's literally a fight. And reason I'm bringing this up is because you meet all kinds of women who are kind of dabbling right now with spices and condiments. You get like tons of information thrown at you. But the intention is to go deeper and understand what are these spices and condiments and how are they playing a role in the woman's life and giving her an edge. So, I mean, there is no one answer because you got to spend time, get through a lot of data to kind of know what actually is the trigger. So I may not have answered your question, but I think it is to a certain extent a bit of trial and error to get to what is discriminatory and what is unifying. Start looking at different use cases or typologies and so on.
All right. So another question was, how do you build a zero budget brand for a startup?
Great question. Yeah, so like I said, so there are three potential, let's say, areas where investments actually go, which I call owned media, earned, and then paid. Which essentially means that you minimize the amount of resources that you'll put behind buying media or doing stuff that you can So I think a lot of synergies need to be drawn. You need to tap into a lot of partners who can actually help you kind of symbiotically put stuff out there. But I think the answer is simply use your own media, your own medium, your own channels. I think it couldn't have been easier than now. 10 years back, it was hard because there were not enough outlets or channels for you to be able to do that. But I think people actually underestimate the power of own media, because if you sit down and list down the different components that actually fall under own media, you'll be amazed of how many surfaces and how many touch points all our brands actually own. So use them to the fullest, exhaust them before you can start spending anywhere on the outside. I mean, starting from email signatures to follow-up mails, to sending your clients something informational, which is of utility or of value, how you do your New Year cards. I mean, go on like shoestring investments, but you can still set up a brand as long as you tap into your own media.
Okay, thank you for that. Another question is, there are people getting traffic to their online brands by paying some of the consultants. So the question is paid traffic over the organic traffic advisable or not?
I think it kind of rallies back to what the objective there was. But if, I mean, there's no, what do you call, a set way of doing it. And in a perfect world, you want to get as much following and traction without spending a penny. That's always ideal. But if you're looking at creating a bit of traction and spending initially, front loading your budget so that you can get a lot of tail and subsequent following, then it's still a practice where people bring in a lot of influencers or influencers into the brand early on, and then kind of build a bit of a lighthouse, and then people sort of kind of follow through. So there's no one answer there, but I think what I'll be able to do is look at this very case to case. But if there was a sequence, or in a perfect world, I would urge you to look at organic first, because, and reason I also say this is that the value of an organic like or an organic follower, I pay a lot more, because that's more voluntary and you didn't facilitate or lubricate that whole process. So that's more like, it's more true, it's more pure. Yeah, so I would build as much as possible organically, although there might be temptations down the line.
Thank you for that as well. So now we have just 2 more questions left.
Yeah.
And one
Can you give me a
question
second? Can you just give me a second, please? Sorry.
Yes, please.
Going low on charge. Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes. So one more question we got was, India being a very emotional crowd, can strong branding help disrupt brand loyalty, and how can it be done effectively?
Yeah. Okay. So the way I see it is, I think every country is emotional, and it's just how we express it. So emotional messages play up and actually make an impression regardless of what market you're in. But having said that, I think there are going to be certain categories, especially in India, where loyalties go extremely deep. And we've seen that especially in FMCG. And these loyalties are extremely hard to shake, because these are institutional brands. They've almost pretty much become like family for a lot of people. But again, there is, and especially in the urban setups and so on, there is what I call an outlook to life, which is called experimental is the new exclusive, which means people are getting a greater currency by trying out new things. And when you try out new things, it kind of holds you nicely in a social setting. So let me give an example. So if I were to open a simple WhatsApp group among a very conservative school mothers, let's say 4th standard, 4th grade kids, and their mothers are all on one WhatsApp group. While they might be extremely conservative, but there's a lot of, let's say, show and tell that happens on those groups, which is, this is what I cooked, this is where I went, this is where I'm dining. So while you might say people are extremely loyal, which is true, but I think equally people are now gaining a lot by playing this card of saying that I did it before you. And while there are different levers that you can use, but one of the things you can definitely sort of leverage or sort of work towards is, how do you make this person look good by using your brand, your product, your service in her peer set? Is one of the very interesting levers on how you can like help people shake away loyalties. So for example, I'll give you a simple one. So when we were doing the work for yoga bars, which is on the lines of a typical energy bar and so on, what traditionally used to happen is that let's say 5 conservative women working in an office, they in their lunch break open their dabbas and share and so on and so forth. One woman on one day takes out a 15-gram protein bar. Now, she's just not taking out a 15-gram protein bar because it's great to taste, because she's making a statement. She's making a statement saying, you guys are laboring over chapatis and eating all of that, but I've got this really modern hack around diet. So how about this? So it's not like you can't shake people up. I think you can, regardless of emotional being the way to deliver it, or even rational emotional, either ways. But I think people, by and large, are looking for ways to go one up on the other. The whole one-upmanship at play there, which one can tap in.
That was very insightful, and I think answers the question as well. Akash, just another 2 questions. I'm sorry, we're getting a few questions drop in right now.
Okay, for sure.
So one question is, what is the most effective method to get customer feedback?
Okay, I might sound a little old world, but a phone call. Nothing feels, I mean, in person is great, but if you can do it over a phone call, that's it. Because I think a meeting in person gives you texture to the feedback, not just the feedback. And best way to go and get it. So if you had somebody who you can actually reach out to, if they have, taken social media to write a post or write a comment and so on, pick up the phone. And in fact, you should pick up the phone on the on the bad feedback first before you get on to the good feedback, because good news can wait, bad news can't. But you should pick up the phone and speak, but we can meet in person even better.
Okay. Thank you for that as well. And one final question would be, so given the current situation of COVID-19 and maybe recession as well in the near future, so brands are struggling to sell but empathize at the same point in a crisis like this. What should be the approach for all companies and brands in times like this?
So it's quite timely, but I have a very simple sort of a framework which is still work in progress, and I will maybe end of day send it to either you or Abhijit, and if you can circulate it, that'll be brilliant. So this is actually a simple flow chart on what you should be doing today in today's circumstances. And what it actually says is this, which is if you're a category which requires people to own or sort of interact with at this point in time, then please talk about yourself and communicate. A classic example being floor cleaners, masks, those delivery brands which are doing delivery and so on and so forth. Like, you're absolutely legit to go out and speak there because you will have ears, who are waiting for that information. If you're not, then they just feel comfortable in staying quiet. Staying quiet, trust me, is also a strategy. Like I said, action versus activity. So don't fall into the pressure from, let's say, somebody from top saying, hey, it's been 3 weeks and you haven't even put up one Instagram post. But think about it. A lot of times in these cases, reflect on your own behavior. You're a consumer as well before you're a practitioner. What is taking your mind space? The reality is none of us wake up every morning and say, hey, let's see what Zara has to say to me, or what does Nutella have to say to me today. Nobody wakes up looking at brand messages. So also be cognizant of people's mind space, and then start working towards, should I put stuff out there or not? So the honest answer is take the time. Like I said, I mean, when the storm coming and the waters are an absolute no-go, the fishermen just repair their nets. My sense is use the time to update your website, rewrite your blogs, clean up the UI, or redo some of the housekeeping stuff. And by housekeeping, I don't mean physical housekeeping, but all the loose ends and open ends that are to do with the business. Clean that up, start publishing, whatever you can remotely do. I think one should do it, but not fall into the trap of saying, oh my God, I haven't communicated in a while, and will I come back to zero, and do I have to start all the way from the bottom? But the reality is the bottom will exist for all brands. So whether you're Reckitt's, you're Colgate, or you are Uber or Nutella, whoever you are, when the market opens and reaches normalcy, everything's going to begin from zero for everyone. So it's not like while you're sleeping, somebody else is catching up. So I think it can wait. It can wait. People have bigger things to worry about than brands, for sure.
Thank you, Akash. So I think that brings us to an end of this random thing today. I think I speak on behalf of the entire crowd, Akash. Thank you for your time. It was really, really helpful. It was really very insightful, and we've seen a lot of the approaches which you have taken, and I think that will help us in our day-to-day life. And I hope as a crowd, we had good questions for you as well. So all to all, I think it was a very good experience for all of us. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Fantastic. Thanks for taking time out. This is extremely valuable, and we'll catch up soon. Okay? Cheers.
Yeah, and just two more things to the crowd here currently. We're having another webinar on Monday, 4 p.m. By Mr. Neerav Jain, who's the founder of City Furnish. And he'll be speaking about how to build a business on Monday. So I will be sending in a couple of links on this chat right now. Please do follow us and we'll keep you updated on the online service on how we can take this forward. So again, everyone, thank you so much for your time. Have a great evening, and we shall see you soon on Monday.
Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you, Akash. Thank you.
Yes.